Hey guys, John V here from PhoneArena. Right now you're watching our in-depth video comparison between the Apple iPhone 5S and the Motorola Moto X. So the iPhone 5S is finally out and it's looking to take the competition by storm with its updated hardware and of course its refreshing new iOS 7 experience. Then again, Motorola is hoping that the custom design aspect of the Moto X combined with its simplified Android experience is going to be enough to sway people away from the iPhone and towards this device instead. When you're flashy and bright, you're bound to get some attention. That's what we get with the Moto X and its unique design. We definitely prefer its looks. It's something just drastically different, and considering that there's a customizability aspect to design, from the patterns to the back casing, the color schemes, and the accents, it has a lot of fine control, whereas with the iPhone 5S, it might not be totally new with its design, but still has a very premium construction thanks to its choice of materials. Fortunately, both handsets are pretty compact, making them easy to grasp with one hand, but it's pretty amazing that the Moto X, even with its larger display, is almost able to match the size of the iPhone 5S. Due to the curved nature of the Moto X's rear casing, it just feels more natural to hold in the hand. Whereas with the iPhone 5S, it's still pretty good to hold, but with its chamfered edges, it just feels a little bit sharp towards the edges. The displays aren't big when it comes to the specs department, but they're still pleasant enough to look at. Now, the iPhone 5S features a 4-inch Retina display with a resolution of 640 by 1136. It's actually an IPS LCD panel, whereas with the Moto X, it's a larger 4.7-inch 720p AMOLED displays, and with that, the unique thing about it is that they've been able to minimize the bezels on the left and right sides to really give it a compact look. Well, the Moto X with its AMOLED panel has that showroom wow factor with its oversaturated color production. On top of that, it produces a really nice deep black color. And finally, it has just some really wide viewing angles, but it's not particularly strong when it comes to outdoor visibility. Below its display, the iPhone 5S has a recessed home button which actually incorporates a biometric fingerprint sensor, which is used to actually do a few things like unlocking the device. Meanwhile, the Moto X doesn't have any buttons below the display. It's clean. They're actually incorporated into the interface. While above the displays, we have their earpieces, their light and proximity sensors, and front-facing cameras. It's a larger 2-megapixel one in the Moto X versus the 1.2 megapixel one in the iPhone 5S. Taking a look around the sides of both handsets, they pretty much have the same common ports and buttons, volume controls and dedicated power buttons. We prefer the set on the iPhone 5 mainly because they're more distinct, raised, and offer a little bit better response versus the Moto X. They also have 3.5mm headset jacks, their speakers, microphones, and respective charging ports. Micro USB on the Moto X versus the Lightning docking port on the iPhone 5S. Around the back, we have the respective cameras. It's an 8-megapixel iSight camera in the iPhone 5S, and it features a backside illuminated sensor and an f2.2 aperture lens. It has 1.5 micron sized pixels and dual LED flash, whereas with the Moto X, it's a slightly larger 10-megapixel clear pixel camera, which features an f2.4 aperture lens, 1.4 micron sized pixels, LED flash, and of course 1080p video recording. Now this is where things become a little bit peculiar, just because as we know, iOS has always been a very simple and intuitive user interface, whereas with Android, there's a little bit of complexity attached to the platform. But with the Moto X, kind of bucks the trend and tries to replicate the same simplified experience that the iPhone has to offer, but in Android form. Considering that the Moto X is running a mostly stock Android Jelly Bean experience, it doesn't have as much of a visual presentation compared to iOS 7. Still, it still beats it when it comes to the personalization aspect, just because we have a host of different widgets, icons, and even live wallpapers to choose from. Meanwhile, the iPhone 5S brings us a very refreshed iOS experience. It's iOS 7 to be exact, and with that it comes with this layered design approach, which has a very interesting look because they employ a lot of these translucency effect, which again just adds to the visual presentation of the platform. And finally, they also offer some really nice transition effects to various things, again accentuating the look of the UI. Notifications and multitasking are handled in pretty much the same manner on both devices. For multitasking, on the iPhone 5S, we just got to double tap the home button twice and gets us a preview windows of all the open apps. So quickly switch between any one of them. And with the Moto X, you just press the multitasking button in the bottom right corner and we can do the same thing. It's neat to have a centralized hub for all notifications. We just swipe down from the top bezels and we gain access to the respective notifications area. Now with the Moto X and Android as a whole, we prefer it a little more just because it adds some secondary functionality. For example, when you get emails, we can actually archive them or just click a button that says reply. And with screenshots, we can instantly share them with a variety of different things. And on top of that, with the Moto X, we gain access to some of the connectivity features and also brightness settings. On the iPhone 5S, you got to swipe up from the bottom bezel to gain access to its control center, where we're greeted to the same functionality. At the end of the day, we really appreciate how these two handsets provide us with a very simplified and even straightforward user experience. It's not really overbearing. Still, they pack some of their own unique features. For example, with the iPhone 5S and its biometric Touch ID fingerprint sensor, we could actually use it to unlock the device or even confirm app purchases. There are actually more goodies that we find very useful with the Moto X. For example, active displays. So when the device is turned over, it automatically will display the time in a small area, as well as some notifications. And it's pretty neat just because it works in the same way as we take it out of our pocket. Additionally, there are some other cool features. For example, the quick capture camera feature. Basically, we just twist the device in our wrist a couple times, it automatically will run the camera app. And then there's the cool touchless control feature with the Moto X, which is a superior voice assistant service than Siri, just because it's actively listening even when the phone is locked. So all you gotta do is say the keywords and it accesses Google Now and provides us with all the useful functions it has to offer. So for example, okay Google Now, what's the weather like?
It's 60 degrees and partly cloudy in Jersey City.
At the end of the day, both platforms work extremely well. Again, they don't try to inundate us with all these different features that might be redundant to some people. Instead, they focus on stuff that really matters, and that's basically offering us with a very simplified and streamlined experience. But between the two, we really got to admit that Moto X has a ton more features that we find far useful. For example, active displays and the touchless control really exemplify the superiority of its experience. So the iPhone 5S is packing a unique processor under the hood. It's a dual-core 1.3 GHz Apple A7 processor, which is based on 64-bit architecture. And we gotta say, it is very snappy and quick with its response, slightly faster than the Moto X. But right now, seeing that the chipset hasn't been really optimized or being taken advantage by developers and game makers, we haven't really seen its true potential. It's also pretty good here with the Moto X. It might not be as intimidating, but nevertheless still a responsive performance. It's powered by a Motorola X8 computing system, which is actually a modified dual-core 1.7 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro processor with 2 GB of RAM and the Adreno 320 GPU. And you can tell here with the performance, basic operations, pretty quick. It doesn't have that much lag, but it doesn't have the same level of fluidity as the iPhone 5S. We get a slightly larger keyboard layout with the Moto X just because of the larger display. You can see it by side here. Thankfully though, the experience is wonderful with both. We have a very responsive performance, great autocorrect features, and of course, they're pretty sizable. Likewise, there's nothing to complain about the web browsing experience with both these handsets. They feature fast 4G LTE data connectivity, so pages load up very quickly. They feature instant page rendering, tight navigational controls, so they have all the elements that we really like in the experience. We actually don't find one music player to be better than the other just because they have the same presentation value and also functionality. When it comes to the audio quality with the respective speakers, it's on the bottom of the iPhone 5S versus the rear in the Moto X. They both emit the same robust and powerful tones, good amount of clarity, and they don't crackle at all. Mainly due to its larger display, we actually prefer the Moto X for watching high-definition videos. It's more ideal, and top of that, with its AMOLED panel, it just produces those rich and vibrant colors that really catches our attention. Additionally, it just has more support for different codecs out of the box, and unlike the iPhone 5S, it doesn't need any type of conversion to get high-definition videos on it. So here are the camera apps of both handsets. They actually adhere to the same principle of providing us with a very simplified experience, meaning that there are no manual controls whatsoever, and they do offer just a few different shooting modes. They both share HDR mode and even panoramic, On the Moto X, we have, of course, photospheres, which allows us to get a 360-degree view. And with the iPhone 5S, we have things like slow motion video capture, a square mode, and of course, this one here, which provides us with different color schemes. There's no questioning about it, folks. It's the iPhone 5S that offers the superior camera in all lighting conditions. As a whole, it just takes the sharper looking visuals over the 10 megapixel clear pixel camera of the Moto X. It's just that the iPhone 5S captures a lot more detail. Colors are a lot more balanced too, good exposure, it handles dynamic range well. And in lower lighting conditions where lighting is a problem, of course, you tend to see a lot more noise with the Moto X. And on top of that, it kind of softens its details considerably more. Not surprisingly too, it's the iPhone 5S that delivers us with the superior 1080p video recording quality. It's just, again, filled with a lot more detail than the Moto X. It also has less artifacting elements as we're panning, and it's also phenomenal with its low lighting performance. We find call quality to be a bit more agreeable with the iPhone 5S, mainly because with the earpiece on the Moto X, voices tend to have a little bit of a robotic tone, while on the iPhone 5S, it's clear, more distinct, and of course audible. There's not one handset that outclasses the other when it comes to battery performance. In fact, we get the same results. It's pretty much the typical 1 day of normal usage from a full charge, which again in this day and age is nothing really new. So we know that both handsets are priced at $200 with a 2-year contract, so there's not one that's more expensive or inexpensive versus the other, and it just depends on what you like more. With the iPhone 5S, it's shown us that it's superior in many different categories, from taking photos and videos, call quality, and even the performance of its processor. It's better here with the iPhone 5S. On top of that, you're getting a premium device for $200. It's worth every penny just because of its choice materials, its solid construction, and on top of that, you have also the new and refreshing iOS 7 experience to complement it. So the Moto X isn't a powerhouse smartphone, but it doesn't have to be just because it's still going to capture some attention over the iPhone 5S in some ways. For example, you have that cool design, very flashy with its color combinations, and you just have complete control in the design aspect of it. Beyond that, when it comes to the software experience, we find the Android Jelly Bean experience on here to be far more useful and practical than what iOS 7 has to offer. For example, you have active displays and even touchless controls, which really enhances the experience while still adhering to the notion of being a very simple UI. So if you guys want to learn more about either the Apple iPhone 5S or the Motorola Moto X, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.